Yeah.
What's up, YouTube? Got invited to actually be a teacher at HCC, which is Houston Community College, for drywall. So I'm just doing a video for them. It's my final state or task, I'll say, for certification for NCCER, which is National Construction Curriculum Education in America. So anyways, hope you guys enjoy it. Most of my followers will probably know most of the material on this video, but you can either brush up, or if somebody knows nothing about drywall, this will be a great video for you. Born and raised in New Orleans, live in Houston now about 5 years. Been doing drywall I'm in my 30th year now. So drywall, for those of you who don't know, 99.9% of houses, drywall is what you have on the walls. So over the studs and over the insulation on your exterior walls, you put sheetrock. So first step of that is hanging the sheetrock. So they hang the sheetrock in vertical on new construction. Usually in commercial, they'll stand them up. Usually you don't have any ceilings, you have drop ceilings, so they stand them up to help with your joints. So the sheetrock comes in 4x8s, 4x10s, 4x12s, and you can get them as much as 4x16s in some states, not all states. And that just gives you less joints, or less in particular butt joints. So your long side of the sheetrock, the 12-foot for standard 4x12 sheet, your 12-foot is a recessed edge. It's tapered, so it's got a slight indentation in it. So when that long side meets up, that's called a flat. When that vertical side hits the other side, it's called a butt joint. So that's how they hang it. They hang it, start your ceiling, and you go to your walls, but I'm going to be specifically talking about finishing after it's hung. So drywall replaced plaster. In the early 1900s, gauging plaster was a very difficult process. It took a lot of material, a lot of time, and a lot of labor. So they came up with gypsum board, which is what sheetrock is. So in this gypsum board made it easier, it cut down on cost, and it made it easier to actually put your walls together, labor and material wise. So that's when sheetrock came to pass. Now every house, every commercial building, everything has sheetrock inside the building, and some in Texas, beware, outside. So anyway, you got 4 steps total, depending on if it's going to be smooth finish or if it's going to be textured walls. So first step is taping. So taping, you have all your joints stacked on top, and they come to the corners. So all your seams get taped first with a flat, and then, well, butt joints first, and then seams, and then your angles. So these are some basic tools that we use for finishing. 6-inch knife is my go-to. Some people use 5-inch knives for their main knife, if you will. We use this for just to scoop mud out of a bucket to put in our pans. We use it to run angles. We use it to touch up. We use it to spot screws. Secondary is an 8-inch knife, which I use. A lot of people don't use an 8, they use a 10. But I'll demonstrate why I use an 8 here shortly. And then last but not least, 12-inch knife. Now they do have 14-inch knives, and you can get as big as 16 or 18 inches in some cases. But these are your main knives. You pan for mud. Some places up north use hawks and trowels. In my opinion, a lot more difficult. So having a pan, you got your 6, you got your mud, you put your mud in your pan, and then you use these knives to apply accordingly based on what step we're on. So step 1 is tape. This is joint tape, pretty standard in any house. Most people are going to use this for your flats. So you have 2 sheets standing up on top of each other. You put the mud on your seam, then you tape, and then you wipe it tight. Inside angles, they're inside 90s. This tape has a perforated crease in it. Comes factory, so that crease gives you your corner on the inside 90. So again, you mud both sides of your angle. You put this in and use your 6-inch knife, and you would wipe each side nice and tight to get a nice square corner, and that seals your joints. So you seal the joints of the angles, you seal the joints of your flats, you seal the joints of your butt joints. This is another tape while we're talking about taping, called Fiber Fuse, that I use on repair work, which is mostly what I do right now in my business. It's a phenomenal tape. I call it foolproof. This tape, if you don't have enough mud behind the tape, at times it will blister. If you have that problem with this, it still sticks, and you can actually put mud through the top of it and it'll still fill and it won't blister. So it's a really phenomenal tape. It's 4 or 5 years out. It's been out now, I think, and I use it for basically all my repair work except on my angles, because you can't really use that for an angle. It doesn't have a crease. So I still have to use this when we tape angles. So anyways, tape coat. We tape all of our joints, butt joints, flats, angles, which is your inside, top angles as well in your corners. After everything's taped, we'll go to a secondary phase, which is called your bed coat or your float coat. So bed coat, float coat on over all of the tape. Essentially all the tape that you put on for every joint has to get mud on it. So by hand finishing, generally speaking, you put 10 inches on your flats, which is your long edge. So your tapered edge on your long side, a 12-foot side of each sheet is a recessed edge. So the way I do it hand finishing, I'll put 8 inches of mud on the seam, and then I feather edge it, and then I'll wipe it with a 12, which will spread it out a little bit past that 8, and will essentially leave 10 inches of mud. Otherwise, if you were in a commercial setting or in a big house or so, you can use what's called a flat box. They have flat boxes that have 8, 10s, and 12s. We'd use a 10 on the float coat, which would do the same thing. It just does it faster and you cover more ground. So that'll be on the seams, on the butt joints. I use a 12-inch knife based on if it rocks. So this 12 is level. I'll put that 12 on the seam if the joint is here. And if it rocks, then you know it's not flat. So you have to build it out. So I'll put 12 inches of mud on each side, like so, 12 down the center, and then I'll lay those edges down. And a float coat, bed coat means you're filling that in and you're preparing for your final skim, which is going to be your finish work. So that's flats, that's butt joints, and then on the angles, on our inside angles, if you're hand finishing, what I'll do is run one side at a time. So I'll put, with my 6-inch knife, about a half a 6, I'll say, feather edge that, and then I'll wipe that where you're floating the edge of that tape and just that one side of the angle. And then on the skim, when we come back, we'll do the other side. So that's our float, and then the screws, we'll have probably 2 coats. If you're doing a smooth finish, you'll have 2 coats of, one on a tape coat and one on your float coat or bed coat. You'll have 2 coats on the screws. For smooth finish, it takes 3 coats. The way we finish in Louisiana for a light orange peel, we did 2, but we do 1 kind of heavy coat with a 6 first, and then I take my 8 and do what we call a cap. So we cover that edge with that 8 because it's a bigger knife. So we slide up and slide down, and we cap it, and that would be 2 coats, which we would do on our skim coat. But with smooth finish, you need on your tape coat, a single coat on the screws, on your float coat, a single coat on the screws, and then a 3rd coat on your skim coat. So going to the skim coats, the same thing, except we're doing more. So our seams now have 10 inches of mud, or vertical seams, or horizontal seams. So then I'm going to take a 12-inch knife, and I'm going to put 12 inches of mud, and the reason we use that is because it covers both edges, it cleans it up, it fills any lap marks in, and then it gives it just a little bit more strength and volume as far as leveling the wall. And then on the butt joint, same thing, we'll do 24 inches on your verticals, 24 inches on each side, and I'll go a little bit past it with my knife, even if I got to use my 6. Get a little bit past it, so when I do my feather edge, and feather edge is something that you do on the edge of your mud, and you put your knife on the wall, but you're only putting an inch or 2 of that side of the knife, and you're gliding down, and that rolls that mud into your area that you're working on, so you're less susceptible to leave a big edge or an overflow, if you will, of the mud. So that's on our butt joints. So our flats will be a 12. On our butt joints, I use a 12-inch knife, but we're going to do 24 inches like we did on our float coat. So your vertical joints where the 2 sheets come together, it's called a butt joint in reference to earlier. So on the skim coat, I'm going to do a 24. I'll put 12 inches on each side of the joint. And then even if I need to go a little bit past, so the skim coat, you want to cover your edges. That's the whole point. So if I've got 24 in the front, it might be 26, and I'll just take my 6, put a little mud down the center, and then a big feather edge on both sides, 6 down the center, and that keeps your center straight. And then I'll wipe with that 12 on both sides, and it leaves a real pretty 24. So depending on, so that's our complete skim coat. So depending on if you're doing a smooth finish, which I'm from New Orleans originally, we did a lot of smooth finish. What we would do is sand everything real nice. We'd touch everything up real good, and then we would take an actual sponge, a wet sponge, and sponge all the edges. That helps blend the edges for walls for smooth finish, such as this. This is a smooth finish wall, which is rare in Texas, by the way. So there's a lot of texture. So the big thing they do is a knockdown. Knockdown is a very, very heavy texture. They spray and they bubble up the wall, and they let that set up, and they take a dragon blade and they knock it down. It leaves little flat spots, kind of like a pool deck. So anyways, there's multiple different textures, but based on what you're doing, whether it's smooth finish, orange peel, knockdown, you can do a roll-on, which they do a lot in Texas, which is simply applying the mud on the wall, a very loose mud with a roller, and it leaves a little bit of stipple. So there's multiple different ways you can finish the project. But that being said, I think we got a pretty good basis of what we got going on as far as drywall for your tape, float, skim, and texture and/or sand and sponge for smooth finish. Thanks. Enjoyed the video. It's just a real basic display of, start to finish on finishing. Obviously no exact showing you guys, but just basic tools, tapes that I use, and so on. So just give you a little basic idea. For you guys already know what you're talking about. I hope you learned a little something in there, or you saw something you're concerned about, or you got questions about. Leave them in the comments below. Please like and subscribe. We're kind of climbing up there, so we're going to try and start putting a few more videos out. As always, Southern style, baby.